All right, guys. So many of you have been asking me what I think is going to be coming out of Total War in 2025. We're already 2 months in, and we haven't heard that much about some of the messages that they had in their last communication in December 2024 about removing the launcher out of Steam, adding the blood packs into future games, factions no longer being an early adopter bonus, which is a pretty positive change to be fair. It was quite scummy when they introduced that, and Shadows of Change being offered as individual purchases for their Lord packs and all that. We don't know a lot about the 2025 Total War celebration of this being the 25th year anniversary of the franchise, how they're going to be storying content throughout the year through various videos and other pieces of content about each title that they've released since 2000. Lots of new projects are being developed apparently, and they're going to be unveiling maybe one or two at the end of the year. Like all of these things that they promised to do. Obviously, it's quite early still in the year, but we haven't heard anything else since then. And yeah, I'm quite curious. I've got thoughts about it and I want to share it. That's what this video is all about. So I think that where we start with all of this is the message that the leadership team had in December of 2023. Roger Collum, the vice president of Creative Assembly, wrote a message that was basically like, we are sorry. We had a difficult year. We had some missteps and mistakes that we made with regards to Warhammer 3 and the pricing policies that we had versus the content that was delivered. Pharaoh and Pharaoh's launch, and again, the same kind of issues there really, and the changes they're making to bring it a bit more in line with people's expectations, how content will be released in 2024 for free. It's a very apologetic, essentially, message, and it's very clear that it was the beginnings of Creative Assembly reforming their strategy in terms of their brand positioning, the positioning of Total War, and the kind of like positivity recouping they needed to implement with their loyal fans and the fans that they lost as well. Because even though you lose fans, they're still interested in finding out what's new in the franchise. They'll dabble here and there in understanding and learning about what's happening. And keeping up to date with the latest news. So that's kind of the beginnings of the strategy, reading between the lines here. It's I'm sorry, and here's what you can expect in 2024. Now, the message that was done at the end of 2024 is looking back and saying thank you, because a lot of what they did in 2024 was successful. It was right. We want to reposition ourselves in a more positive way. How do we do this? We need to give back to our community. As much as we've taken away in 2023, we need to give back tenfold. That was basically the kind of marketing ethos that they had. So they did a lot of free content for Pharaoh with the high tides, with dynasties. They did a lot of free content for the Shadows of Change DLC to bring it in line with the kind of pricing policy there. They did a lot of transparency through a series of videos with developers, etc., about what's happening behind the scenes. And they've tried. You can't obviously refute that. They have tried to be more positive, to be more constructive with the way they talk to their player base and with how they develop and release their content. And again, as I said, they lay out how they're planning to continue this through 2025 as well. So the first answer to your question, what is 2025 going to be like, is simply put, more of what they did in 2024. The company is still run by marketing execs, people who have first in their mind, how do we give back to our shareholders? How do we generate more and more revenue? And all that starts with recouping the goodwill, the positive brand perception that we lost in 2023. And I think they're going to be continuing to do that for a number of years. But 2025 is important and interesting because, as they said here, they're now moving on from fixing things that they made mistakes with to, right, how do we continue this into delivering value positioning for our audience? And how they're going to do this, the delivery mechanism is a look back in our 2025 anniversary with each of our releases since 2000 in a storied string of content releases this year. That's mainly, I'm guessing, going to be video releases about each of the games, how how good they did, how amazing these games were, really going ham on the nostalgia factor for all of these games that people really trusted and invested their time and money into, to kind of, again, like I said, hammer home the fact that Total War started somewhere with everyone, and it was an amazing experience, and they recognize it. And alongside that, of course, they'll try and recognize some of the mistakes they made along the way with those games as well, right? They have to recognize that to seem more human, to seem really down to earth. And that's kind of the marketing strategy I think they're going to go with this year. Continue that momentum of recouping goodwill, except with this year, it's going to be all about nostalgia, the games that we loved and how well they played. And of course, you know, some of the mistakes that we made. Rome 2, of course, Three Kingdoms, maybe. I don't know. Maybe they'll touch on Three Kingdoms. I think it's still a bit of a sore point for a lot of players. But yeah, basically recouping that goodwill through fans that they've lost, right? So when you look at 2024, it's all about fans that they still have. They're invested. They just they lost a bit of trust. They were expecting more. So they've cleared the air, I think, with a lot of fans that are loyal and they still play a lot of the games and they really enjoy the franchise. All of that has been recouped. I think now the focus is on all of those players and fans that they've lost. They've walked away, sort of, you know. Every now and then they might keep up to date with various bits of news and announcements and videos here and there, but they're not really interested in buying a new game. They've lost a lot of their faith in CA, right? This is the year where they try and push a marketing narrative to gain those people back, and nostalgia and looking back at your first game and how these games played and how we love these. We know what these games were and what made them well, and we fix those mistakes so you can trust us to know how the next game can use all of these things to make it even better and propel it forward into the future of what Total War will be. So that's how I see 2025 being from a kind of market positioning, brand goodwill point of view. Now, assuming all of this is true, which of course, you know, I can admit there's a margin of error. I can be totally wrong or just a little bit wrong, or, you know, I'm a creator. I'm sharing an opinion here. You have to be able to admit that you can be wrong. And if I'm wrong, then that's fair enough. But assuming for a moment that this is true, which I don't think is that much of a stretch, you know, there are very clear pieces of wording and communication within this message that show they're going to be going back and looking at previous games, celebrating the games that made the company, that provided positive memories to a lot of players out there who've walked away from the franchise, and creating new ways to make more positive change. That's a really interesting little bit here about the direction of where the franchise is going, what Creative Assembly's priorities are in 2025, right? And I think it's worth saying, you know, assuming all of this is true, that 2025 is going to be a build-up. It's going to be a build-up based on, you know, nostalgia factor, looking at all these games that made the franchise, these positive memories, everything. It's going to be a build-up into the tail end of the year where they unveil the new projects that they've been working on. That's what all of this is all about. It's a massive marketing narrative campaign to lead up to the peak of people's involvement and interest in Total War again, because of all these great positive things they're doing for loyal fans, and also tapping into all these great things they did for fans that walked away to bring them back into the fold, because here is our next project. If you think about it that way, doing all of this and then saying our next game is Star Wars Total War would be quite weird, wouldn't it? It would be very counterintuitive after going through a year of marketing spiel and content to celebrate, you know, Rome Total War, Medieval 2, Empire, Napoleon, Shogun 2, Rome 2, Attila, Thrones of Britannia, and then Three Kingdoms, the Warhammer games, Troy, Pharaoh, which is the tail end. You know, the majority of this content cycle is going to be focused on all the historicals they've made over the years, the last 25 years. It would be really, really weird, I think, to follow that up with, by the way, guys, you know, we've celebrated all of this, and now we're going into Star Wars. You know, it's not very intuitive. I don't think it's the direction that CA will go into. I think that the strategy was always to go back into into historical in a way that makes tons of money for them. I think the execs and the marketing people all just made a huge mistake by assuming people would enjoy historical and the design and the development ethos there the way they've been enjoying the Warhammer games, which simply isn't true, of course. Nobody actually really wants that kind of design ethos in a historical game. And you can see, of course, the sales and the player base numbers, all of that jazz. So Pharaoh wasn't a successful launch back into consistent historical development for CA. And I think that's still the strategy today for the company, even though Pharaoh flopped and you know, obviously marketing driven, let's just do what we've done, comfort for CA and launch it and make lots of revenue for very little effort. That sort of approach did not work, and that's why, and it backfired in a big way. That's why all of this has been happening for the last year. And I think, regardless, I think it's still their strategy to do that, to go back into historical in a big way. And I think that kind of piece of the puzzle fits with this message so well. I mean, looking back at all the games that made your company, telling your fan base that you know how they developed it, you know how you made mistakes and you fixed them, and you care about historical in your franchise. It's a big part of what made Total War. You know, I think saying all of this is going to lead up to an announcement of a historical game, and it makes perfect sense, you know. But you also have to say hand in hand, you know, the end of this content look back celebrating marketing cycle is going to end with celebrating Warhammer 3. So it's definitely going to come hand in hand with a major announcement, I think, about either Warhammer 3 and its future DLCs, a very specific, maybe really popular lord or faction or a map expansion or something that people are really expecting for it, or another major game that will add to that side of the franchise as well, Warhammer 40k or Age of Sigmar. I think that's the way CA continues their development strategy. On the one hand, it's recouping, it's kind of tapping into nostalgia, celebrating the games that made them, letting people know that they know how to make these games and that they should have faith in the next iteration of Total War, and then ending that celebration with, you know, this is what made us, so we're going back to it and making a new major historical game that you've been asking for. And we're continuing for our loyal fans the line of fantasy that's built us up and propped us up the last few years, because, you know, we love doing this, with this major feature for Warhammer 3 that you've been requesting, or Warhammer 40k or Age of Sigmar. That's my prediction basically for 2025. And that's essentially it for today, guys. I've been thinking about this for the last few days, you know, rationally, taking a step back, thinking about, you know, what might be coming out of this year, reading between the lines of their announcement in December, how CA is approaching their marketing for this year, and what that might be leading to from an announcement perspective for new games. This is how it makes sense to me. You know, a lot of people will say, oh, Termi has too much hope, historical is dead, or the vice versa. People might say, oh, Termi's being too negative, Pharaoh's actually really good, all that jazz. You know, I don't really care. I'm just neutral with all of this. I don't really have any hope. And equally, I'm not being too negative. You know, I think it's worth a lot more being in the middle and taking a considerate stance on how, if I was CA, how I would approach marketing and what I would be doing next if I want to make the most of what I have. And that's how I see it, basically. So yeah, that's going to be the end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it informative, give it a like, drop any thoughts or questions in the comments section below. I'm always interested in hearing your thoughts, and I try to comment whenever I can. And subscribe to see more videos just like this, and mod spotlights especially. I've been going back into a lot of mod videos for Total War and other strategy games. I'm going to be actually pivoting, I think, the channel towards being more of just a general strategy game channel. So I'm going to be making videos about other games very soon as well. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.